Hi, my name's Tom, and I'm one of the hosts on the Failing Writers podcast. Now, if you're a fan of the Failing Writers podcast, we'd love it if you told other people about the Failing Writers podcast. So if you're enjoying our podcast, the Failing Writers podcast, we'd love it if you could tell other people that they should listen too. Thanks very much for your help. Anyway, enough of me wittering on. Here's the Failing Writers podcast.
We've all heard the term, don't give up the day job. I'm sure some of us have heard it more than others.
I often get told to give up the day job whilst I'm doing my day job.
Or people say, don't give up the day job, and you go, this actually is my day job. You get paid to do that? What, really?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
But yes, it is quite an alluring idea for a writer, isn't it? Being a full-time writer.
Well, come on, I don't think anyone likes the idea of just becoming a writer for a living and just having your own free time and just spending time getting paid just to sit and write. That sounds horrendous, doesn't it?
It does sound awful.
I mean, and we definitely don't dream about doing it maybe on a Mediterranean island or in a cute little cabin or anything like that. I don't think it's got a romanticism.
I like the way you've gone straight to the med.
Yeah, why not? Why wouldn't you?
Oh, you would, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I think that's I was going to say, what images does it conjure in your mind? Like, if you were able to afford to.
I've said those things, John, but it isn't those things. I am a realist. It would be me in my pants, constantly going to get coffee, eating too many biscuits, and not really getting the stuff done that I'm meant to be doing, and then rushing just before deadline.
Yeah, you're not on the side of Lake Como on a 1960s Olivetti, with a pipe.
No, I'm spending 4 days without showering. Very, very different thing.
Desperately trying to bang out that last.
If we're going to be honest,
See, I think I'd go for the Happy Mondays rock and roll style of getting given an advance, going to a Caribbean island for a few weeks,
spanking
just
it
having
all,
have a bender,
party.
and then try and write some on a fag packet on the way back home. That'd be my approach.
We're getting someone else to write up your idea for you.
Yeah.
All of those sound good to me.
Yeah, all good options, all viable options.
Sat in your pants sounds fine to me. But sadly, for most of us, most of the time, that is a little bit of a pipe dream. And
no, we don't all have Tom's pants.
No,
so
that's true. That is true.
Yeah.
And very nice pants they are. We most of us couldn't even begin to consider switching off the regular income tap. And was it Mike? Did Mike Gale say something? He said, "Why would you give up your day job?" He said, "Don't give up your day job unless you have to."
Yeah.
Because apart from anything else, your day job is, it's a source of stories and characters and stuff like that. But when you become a full-time author, your world revolves around writing, doesn't it? So I don't know how interesting that is. Or do you just end up writing about writers and writing about writing? I think a lot of writers do that.
Well, I find that very frustrating. Have you noticed how many films and books and things there are about writing?
Yeah.
There's too many. It should be banned as a subject matter. It's very insular, isn't it? And
it is, yeah.
And it's always often glamorized and romanticized to the point of silliness, isn't it? Like someone sat in their massive New York loft apartment.
Yeah.
Banging out their speculative screenplay or something.
Yeah.
Think,
I mean, that's why everyone wants to be a writer.
That's the trouble. Yeah, it's portrayed unfairly.
It's unrealistic.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
So you have to ask yourself what kind of person would think that they possibly were going to throw in the day job and give it a go.
I mean, it's likely to be someone who's closer to a stage in their career where that might be a reasonable idea, I suppose. But Tom, you spotted a tweet, didn't you, towards the end of last year?
I did, many moons ago, yeah.
From a writer called J C Duncan.
Well, it stuck out to me initially because he said, I'm going to give up the day job, give it a year, and I'm going to become a full-time writer. That's what I'm planning to do. And I thought, my God, that's amazing. That's what we'd all want to do, isn't it?
Hell of a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah. Not only that, but he was going to tweet about it in a very, very, transparent way.
Yeah, it's a very public.
So we were like, hello, we need to keep tabs on this fella.
Now, we find out when we speak to him that actually he was what we would perceive as a pretty successful writer.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's less of a jumping off point.
Then again, our bar for being a successful writer is quite low anyway, isn't it?
It's quite low. Low. But nevertheless, still an exciting and brave thing to do, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
So we thought it'd be quite good to keep tabs on him and hope that either he became some massive, massive success or it all went tits up.
Yeah.
Either way,
some form
great
of
fodder
extremism.
for the podcast.
Yes.
Either way, we want to talk to him. So that's exactly what we've done. So yeah, if you've ever dreamed about becoming a full-time writer, throwing in the day job and giving it a go, this is the interview you need to listen to. Hello, James Duncan.
Hello.
AKA author J C Duncan.
Yeah, of course.
At the end of September last year, 2023, you set yourself a big old goal, didn't you? You gave yourself a year to become a full-time writer.
That is correct.
I'll read the tweet, actually, that you said, this summer my company was sold and I was fired. At the same time, my book sales bloomed, going towards the level where I could earn a living from authoring. I've decided to take the leap and I'm giving myself 1 year to make this work full-time. I've got #1 year to pro.
Great hashtag.
It's a good hashtag.
And you went on to say, I'm giving myself until the end of 2024, or you'll start job hunting. You went on to say you would be sharing your progress, warts and all, along the way, and you were doing like a kind of monthly thread about how it was all going. And that caught our eye. And so we decided to keep an eye on your progress.
And it's a shame that you did.
That sounds really bad, doesn't it? Because as the failing writers, for us to go, we thought this one could be for us.
You found a failing hashtag project on Twitter and kept track of it. No, I'm thrilled that you did.
Thought there's only one way this one's going. We'll have some of that action.
That's right. And we thought we'd that'd be a lovely big scab to pick at. How do you feel about that?
I feel great about it, actually. It was fun. The opening tweet thread, which I expected the usual 4 people to read, got a huge amount of attention. I had a dozen DMs from other authors being like, "Oh, this is wonderful. I want to follow this." And then people, a few of them I still talk to, and so that part of it's great. The falling flat on my face publicly, not great, but that was sort of the point. I did say that it was going to be a genuine. Most of these things are reflective, so they have survivor bias, and people write about their success after being successful. Yeah. But very few people set out and say, right, I'm going to write about my intent to succeed, and the whole way. And then if it doesn't, you're all going to see me fall over in public. So
which is very brave.
Yeah, I felt like it was fun, and it gave me a little bit of accountability. And I joke a bit. In the end, it wasn't a failure. It was just a change in circumstances. It didn't live up to what I wanted it to, but it also didn't completely fall over. Things changed, and I had to just kind of be honest and say, I'm no longer targeting being a full-time professional writer at the moment. It doesn't mean I won't in the future, but I have my own company now developing some tabletop gaming products, and it would have been dishonest to pretend that I didn't do that.
Have you found, although it wasn't sort of the raging success that you might have hoped for, did it breed certain writing practices or sort of an attitude, or is there anything that you've kind of taken away from it as a positive in terms of writing?
Yes, I think the accountability is a thing, because each month I really wanted to try and talk about something distinct. I think 3 months in a row, I promised I was going to go through my Amazon ads and try and work out how to improve them, and then never actually got around to doing that. So it wasn't a perfect method of accountability, but it did make me think more about the monthly basis of making progress.
Yeah.
And in the month where I didn't really do any writing, I then was more aware of it and more aware of trying to fix that problem. So, I think actually it was helpful.
Maybe tell us about your starting point, because we're kind of making this sound like, you had this dream and it failed, but that's not really the full story at all. In fact, I would count you as a very successful author. Yeah. Even though this particular goal hasn't been achieved, I suspect the vast majority of writers would look at your sales figures and wish that they could get anywhere close to them.
Give me a minute while I swoon. I'll tackle that last bit first. I think in the very first tweet thread, I think I tried to define what success is, and it is personal largely. I'm not very successful. Things have gone better than I hoped. I'd say, top 10% of my sort of range of expectations, which is fantastic. But at the same time, I wasn't successful enough to do what I wanted to do, which was support myself via my writing so far. So that's the first thing. Yeah. In terms of how it started, I guess about 5-6 years ago, I was essentially bored. I'd always loved reading. I'd always liked sort of the idea of writing, and I'd done a little bit of writing. But I took up 2 related hobbies to quell that boredom. One was bladesmithing, which is something I just thought was really cool to try. And the other was writing. And inevitably, my first series then became about a bladesmith. in medieval Europe and sort of the end of the Viking era. And I learned how to make some of the weapons and tools that were used in my books to help inform the books. And so that's how I got into writing. And then I lost my job 3 years ago, sort of. Well, it went down to part-time. And then a year ago, it went completely, pretty much. So I suddenly had a lot more time to write than I expected to have. And instead of writing, one book a year or two, suddenly I could write 2 books a year. And that made it possible to really take it seriously as a potential career. So I guess around about the time my second book released, I started thinking, okay, I could actually try and make a career out of this. So when I lost my job, I thought I just signed a contract with my new publisher, Boldwood, and my 4th book had just come out and was doing very well. So my 3rd book was the first one that took off. Up until then, I wasn't even making my money back on editing costs.
Right. Yeah.
And that's a lesson in itself for a lot of new authors who kind of hope for instant, success, or even pray for it, or maybe think it might be possible. And it can, but sometimes, you have to do 2 or 3 books just to see if it will even work. And so 3rd book worked, and then the 4th book worked, and that's when I got my publishing contract. And I was starting to think, yeah, man, this is, I'm 2 steps away from the VIP club here.
Yeah.
I could keep pushing this. I could do 3-4 books a year, and I could earn, as I said in the thread, enough to replace my professional salary, which I estimated I needed to earn between 80 and 100,000 in gross income, just in sales income, to make that happen. Yeah. And that sounds like a huge number to most people in authoring, and I guess most people in general, but that doesn't take account for how much you have to spend as self-published authors, as you all know. Sure. So, that's before advertising costs, editing costs, maps, graphics, covers, proofreading, going to conventions, all that other stuff. So I looked at my sales and I looked at the trajectory around about the launch of book 4, and it looked like a, safe to the moon rocket ship crypto stuff. It looked great. I was earning £3,500 a month in income, and it was going up £500 a month. So I sort of extrapolated that incredibly optimistically and thought, I could hit that target. And then reality set in, and it was more like, well, I could maintain that level. And then reality set in a little bit more, and I'm now back down to about 1.5 every month.
Bloody reality coming in with its...
Yeah,
reality.
It is. Yeah. It is a shame, isn't it? So
it's in a bloody way.
Oh.
Yeah, so...
Such a downer reality.
It is, and I got a big dose of it. And everything's still going well. I think I allowed my expectations to run a little bit wild. And I sort of thought, well, my income has doubled every year so far, so sure, it will double next year. And that isn't, it isn't convenient like that. That's not how things work. So it is possible I'll hit that goal or that income level in a few years' time, a year or two maybe. But it's far from guaranteed.
I'm guessing the more books you have out there, then you just got a bigger backlist, and your stuff should kind of tick away and feed into the next series. Or
absolutely. I think I've heard it from a dozen authors more experienced and more eligible to give advice than me, that the most important thing that an author can have is a backlist, because the only way to make money as an author is to have one extraordinary runaway success, and those people are unicorns. Or it's to develop a fan base who want to read all of your books. And if you only have 2 books, you can't sell your fan base enough books for it to work out.
Yeah.
And you said in your particular scenario, you felt that there wasn't enough of a transition between your new series dragging people through to your old stuff.
Correct.
Was that one of the reasons you felt it kind of...
That was one of the big disappointments for me in my professional publishing contract, is that I assumed that it would help reach a new audience, and that quite a lot of that new audience would then go back to my original series and really give it a big boost. Because what you see, and if you've got those threads up, is that you'll see that I did a whole thread on publishing cycle and how releasing a new book in a series massively improves the sales of the previous books in the series. And that's why you've got to keep that tempo up to a certain level. And I hate to put too much pressure on people to say, oh, you have to do it every 6 months, you have to do it every 9 months, you have to do it every 12 months, whatever it is, because it's different for each genre, it's different for each person. But to a certain extent, your readers expect a new book, kind of within a year of the previous one. That's how it is, whether we like it or not. So what I hoped was that my new series would have a similar effect, driving new fans towards my old series. That just didn't really happen. And I'm still confused and surprised by that, because my new series is more popular than my previous one in terms of absolute numbers of readers. My first book in my new series with Boldwood Books sold more in its first 2 months than my first book did in the whole year, and continue to just go up, and it's great. But the numbers of sales for my old book seem to be completely unaffected. So people are just not, people who read that book are just not going back.
Are people not making the connection between new stuff and old stuff?
I don't know. You know what? This is something I'm actively looking into, and I don't have any clever answers.
If you knew the answer, Dave,
yeah.
Well, I suppose so, yeah.
Well, I don't even really have good theories. I mean, a part of it is that because it's a professionally published book, it doesn't have all the stuff I would put in the back of one of my books. You know, I put afterword and all sorts of other stuff in the back of my self-published books. And professional publishers, you know, you tend to get to the end of a book by a major publisher or even one of these indies, and you read the end, and then there's like one page, and then that's it. You're done.
Yeah.
So there isn't the kind of after stuff, and you can get this free book here and free novella there, and join my writers mailing list and all this kind of stuff.
Have they definitely spelt your name right on the new books? Is people searching and going,
I actually chose
James Duncan. I can't find him anywhere.
Yeah, I actually chose the pen name J C Duncan because it was easy to spell. Because my real name, no one can spell it when they hear it. So let's do some science. My real name is James Simmons. It's not a secret. I'm not doxing myself. My name is James Simmons. How is that spelled? Oh, it's on the screen. That's cheating.
Was it double M? Is it double M?
Yeah, I would have gone double M.
Most people go double M. Some people put a Y in there. Some people take the D out. You can't Google it. I'm ungoogleable. So I thought I'd put Duncan because it's my middle name, and I thought people would be able to spell it, but that still sometimes goes wrong. But yeah, so my new series didn't help the old one kick off in the way I thought it would. So I'm going to have to let the new series build organically in the way that the first one did in order to really see any kind of financial rewards to that. So financially, not been a great success. Artistically and sort of in writing career, fabulous. Love my new publisher.
Yeah.
Shifted huge numbers of books compared to my original efforts when I was self-published in my first couple of years. They've spread out to new markets. They've done audiobooks, which I'd never done before. They've done, large text, library lending, all the stuff that's really hard to do when you're self-published, which has been fantastic. And then on the back of that, I managed to get a contract with Podium to do audiobooks of my self-published series because they were convinced by the fact that someone was investing in audiobooks for my new series. So the whole thing's been fantastic in terms of career. But because you're on a 25% royalty and there are earnouts and all that kind of stuff, financially, it just hasn't really done anything yet. So, long story, and it is a long story, but long story short, that's why I then ended the 1 year to pro thing as being overly optimistic and started this company with a couple of friends of mine who are also colleagues of mine.
Yeah. So in terms of writing, how many books are we talking? We're going back to kind of one book a year?
I'm trying to do 2. Actually, this year I'll do 3, but that's because I had some projects kind of built up. So
some stuff in the bank.
That wasn't a standing start.
No. So I had one book that I wrote before this year started, and I'm going to write. I've already written my first book of this year, and I will write one more book at least later this year.
Right. Very good.
I'm probably going to average out at 2 books a year for my professional publisher, but they're relatively short, and I will hopefully do 1 book a year when I can of my self-publishing, which tend to be longer and more complicated, because that's the market pressure. The publishers want simple commercial fiction that they can send to a wide audience. They take a lot of flack for that. They take a lot of criticism for that. But that's just the way that business works. They want a product that is applicable to a wide audience because then they're more likely to make money off it. And they're businesses. And self-publishing, yes, you're a business, but you're also an artiste, and you want your special love child project out there. And you want it to be complicated, and screw people who say it can't be 250,000 words. It damn well can. So yeah, you have different aims and objectives, and you're willing to take more risk, I guess, when it's your own project. So probably 2 to 3 books a year is what I'm going to do. And before I was thinking it was going to be 4.
Yeah.
I do write very quickly.
Right. Well, that's not bad considering you're not doing it full time. I don't even know how that's possible, to be honest.
The secret is not having children.
I knew we'd gone wrong somewhere.
Damn it. Yeah, this is how we started. Yeah.
Imagine if you spent every hour of childcare writing instead. You'd have written a series a year.
Yeah. We really messed up, lads.
Yeah. Life decisions.
You've had quite an unconventional journey in a way, haven't you? Did I read that you don't have an agent, or have I made that up?
I don't have an agent. So obviously, I didn't have an agent when I was doing self-published stuff. And several people have asked, and I'll summarize it. How did I end up with a professional contract if I didn't have an agent? Well, blind luck.
There we go.
So this publisher, Baldwood, and the editor I work with My theory, and I think this is correct, is she went down the self-published Viking fiction chart, basically, and just hired everyone one by one.
Who's doing well?
Just hired everyone one by one, top down, which is a smart strategy. They decided they wanted to do Viking fiction because it's kind of a hot button thing or whatever, or she was interested in it. She'd done it before with some of her previous authors when she was at a previous company. And so she took the most successful new self-published author, which is Peter Gibbons, who just exploded out of nowhere to be this publishing behemoth 3 years ago. He started roughly the same time as me and is 10 times as successful by most metrics. Probably all metrics. I'm being too generous to myself. And then she went down the list after signing him and just
pillaged the list.
Yeah. And I was fourth on that list of self-published Viking authors. And so, got down to me finally, sort of the bottom of the barrel, and then I got offered a contract.
Wow, brilliant.
And you just can't plan that, you can't expect it. You know that is just being born lucky. But you have to prepare yourself to be lucky. You have to put in the work and get to that point where if lightning does strike, you're ready.
Yeah. How did you learn the whole self-publishing game? Did you just sort of pick it up as you went along, or did you study it?
Lots of studying. Yeah, I cannot recommend enough the musings and blogs of Hugh Howey, who obviously knows pretty much everything there is to know about publishing. He used to work, actually, not everyone might know his background, but he used to work in a bookshop as a bookseller.
Oh, right.
And then he started writing and self-publishing back when self-publishing was an insane thing that people didn't do, and made a success of it. And so he's grown up as basically the king of self-publishing from the moment of its inception. And he's been at the front of every kind of new wave. And then when Kindle was there, he was there. And he's been at completely the forefront. So his website has quite short writings on it, but excellent advice for how to get started.
Yeah.
And then I've listened to a lot of blogs and podcasts. I do quite like the, I know he's controversial, but the YouTube videos of the self-publishing show.
Oh, yeah. Why controversial?
Let's not start a Twitter war by going over it now because it's not relevant. But some people find him to be a controversial figure. But he gets a lot of great guests on. He really knows what he's talking about. And so that was a great resource. I went to quite a few sort of authors conventions and just got to know authors.
Right.
And I got to know other self-published authors. So people like Ryan Carhill and Michael R. Miller, who are big in the sort of fantasy writing, self-publishing space. Had a lot of conversations with them.
And they were happy for you to kind of reach out if you had a question? Or...
Yeah, I mean, I've had dinner with them and been to conferences because we all went to FantasyCon, which is sort of biggest fantasy convention in the UK each year. At those kind of things, everyone is incredibly open and friendly. And Ryan actually started roughly the same time as me. Michael R. Miller, he's been around for about 5 years longer. There's also Philip Crentrell. And we just all ended up in like Wagamamas, talking and eating too much food and discussing how you do things and what strategies are and stuff. And that networking is incredibly important. And I would encourage anyone who's into self-publishing or who's starting, find your nearest affordable writers convention and just turn up with an open mind.
Just go to Wagamamas and find the author's table.
Yeah, have dinner with people, talk to them. No one likes the people who go there just trying to be leeches and, just trying to sort of be overtly just needy. But if you just go there and you're a bit of a sponge and you're open to information and you're just friendly and talk to people, there's a wealth of information and lots of authors who are just really happy to talk about what they've done. Because most of us live in a little box where we don't speak to anyone.
Yes.
And when someone comes up to you and says, you're a great success, please tell me how. You're like, well, my son.
Have a seat.
Yes. I would love to tell you how I'm a great success. So, I mean, this is what you guys are doing to me here. The very first thing you did in this podcast is butter me up and say, well, you're a great success. And I can't tell you how long it would be before I got bored of people saying that to me. So that kind of networking is really important. So read blogs by people who've done self-publishing, do networking. YouTube's a great resource. Don't pay for anything. I bought one book on self-publishing that was about $6, and it was some of the least good advice I had on self-publishing. It was out of date. It
was from 20 years ago.
Yeah, it was only probably 4 years ago, but at the time, 4 years ago.
But 4 years is probably too late, isn't it?
That's the thing.
We've moved on.
It's an industry that moves very quickly. For example, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when audiobooks really started to take off, some people made huge amounts of money on audiobooks, and the same strategies that worked then don't work now. And the people who made that money have told me in person that doesn't work anymore. But that advice on how to do it is still out there and people still follow it. So you do have to make sure that your advice is up to date. Not saying that audiobooks don't work. It's just that the specific strategies that they use to make theirs successful are no longer applicable.
How do they work for you? Are the numbers looking quite good?
Audiobooks?
Yeah.
Terrible.
Interesting.
I can't sell an audiobook to save my life.
I wonder why that is. That's interesting, isn't
I don't know. If you find out, tell me.
Yeah, because I read that the majority of listeners to books are men. And I would have thought that you are primarily selling to men. Obviously not exclusively, but...
Obviously I don't get figures. And I'm going to probably end up saying something controversial, but it does seem like a large section of my readership are sort of middle-aged to retiree age women.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And that isn't in any way a bad thing. I think there's quite a lot of women who really love historical fiction, especially kind of what would traditionally be regarded as sort of men's adventure fiction.
Right. You see, there's my assumption out the window. Just goes to show.
It's made an ass of you, and
it might just be that women are more willing to actually send an email to the author they've been reading. But I do get a lot of emails saying, now this sounds dodgy, but I get a lot of emails saying, hi, I loved your book and whatever from women. So I get them from men as well.
Are they in your area? Because if they might not be,
I don't ask those sort of questions. Right. Maybe I should just please take this survey. That's okay. Moving on.
Changing the subject entirely. I was going to say your Twitter threads were very refreshing in how transparent they were. Obviously, there's a lot of posturing and pretending and feathering one's own nests on Twitter. But obviously, part of the idea behind your adventure was to be thoroughly transparent and tell it how it is.
Yeah.
Was that therapeutic for you while you were doing it, or did you feel exposed doing that, or how did that sit with you?
Well, the reason I did it is because I'd really appreciated. I know you didn't ask this question, but the reason I did it is because I'd really appreciated it when other authors were really transparent with me. So that was my kind of reason for doing it, was I wanted to kind of pass that on. And there was a couple of authors who, when I was just publishing my very first book and I was an absolute and complete nobody, and now I'm just a complete nobody. But when I was just absolutely on the bottom rung of the ladder, a couple of people who sort of reached out and were like, give me a hand. And I basically just wrote the kind of thing that I would have wanted to see.
Yeah.
That was my drive. In terms of how I felt about it, my main concern was that out of context or even in context, it would just come across as bragging, like humble brag, sort of like here are my sales figures. Because people are very sensitive to that. I've sold 20,000 books and £50,000 worth of sales or whatever.
Right, don't go on about it.
Exactly. So you can't, as soon as you mention that, some people are going to feel defensive about it or feel like, I had to include it. Otherwise I couldn't talk about it.
Yeah.
And in the end, I didn't get any negative feedback whatsoever. But I was worried that I'd get people being like, he's just taking any excuse.
You kind of headed that off at the pass, though, didn't you? In your initial outlining of it, you were very clear that these facts need to be shared. Otherwise, none of this makes any sense.
Yeah, because it sounds like a huge amount. You're taking £50,000 in, great. But I've spent 55, 57 or something. I'm still in the negative at the moment. It will cross over this year. So by the end of this year, I'll be profitable based on trends. And the fact that I haven't spent that much money this year on making new books. But, there's a huge amount of money that's gone into advertising and professionals. And it's only just about to catch up in terms of royalties. So it sounds like bragging until you delve into the facts. And then what you realize I'm saying is I've set fire to this much money so far. I've shocked quite a few professionally published authors at conventions and stuff when I tell them that, because they're like, oh, wow, that you've taken in loads. And I'm like, yeah, but you haven't seen my expenses account.
My outgoings.
Yeah. It's an investment.
Because obviously when you're spending that amount of money on marketing and stuff like that, let us learn from you. What worked well for you? How did you spend your budget? And did it work?
Was it mostly Wagamama's?
Mostly Wagamama's. Amazon ads. Now the problem with this is I know I'll put a caveat of it's different for different people and what works is going to vary.
Yeah, and country it seems as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's huge. It's a huge thing, the country. So and genre. And so when I say what worked for me is Amazon ads, people will then take that on board and go, I need to do Amazon ads.
Yeah.
That isn't necessarily true. I know people who've had huge success with Facebook ads. My Facebook ads completely failed. I don't even know why. I didn't probably put enough work into Facebook. I've never tried TikTok. massively successful for some people. Instagram was a total waste of time for me. Great success for some people. So you sort of have to dip your toe into every pool to find out what's going to work.
Yeah.
And for me, what worked primarily was Amazon UK ads were my most efficient. Amazon USA works, but it's very expensive. The cost per click on Amazon ads is horrifying.
So you need to sell a hell of a lot of books. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the kind of spend and return ratio on your Amazon ads in the UK?
So initially the ROI was about 100%, which means in Amazon terms, it's actually only 70% because they count the money that they charge you. I feel it's a con. This is a bit of a controversial subject, but I think Amazon is trying to con people into thinking they've earned more money than they have and therefore spending more money than they think. Because what they say is if you have an ROI, that means you spent £1 and you've earned £1 back. But actually Amazon takes 30p of that pound. So you've actually only said 70%. But initially my UK ads were around 100 to 120% ROI. And that was fine because although that on the surface is a loss, as I explained in that thread, for those who haven't read it,
you're building
a fan base. Basically you can't think of it as selling a book. You are purchasing a fan. You're purchasing a reader at least. And 70% of those readers, in my case, because I've done the numbers, and again, it was on one of the threads, about 70% will then go on to read the second book. And then 90% of them will go on to read the third book, and 90% of them will go on to read the fourth book. And that read-through rate, which is the industry term for it, is very important. And once you can work out your read-through rate, you can work out what the value of a reader is, and then you can go back and work out, okay, is it worth an ROI of 100%? The answer is almost always yes. In fact, I would probably say it's always yes. If the ROI is 200%, I reckon a reader to me is worth about 200 to 250% in equivalent terms. If I can get an ad that performs under 200%, I'm happy with it. In America, it was starting to get towards 350, 400%. And I don't think I think I'm just a slave to Amazon at that point. I think I just work for them for free because I'm giving every single pound that I earn from Amazon USA, I'm just giving it to Amazon. I don't get anything. So
it's a massive win-win for Amazon, basically.
Oh, it is. Sorry, Amazon, if you're listening. I promise I'm a good writer. Please don't ban my account.
They're not. Don't worry.
I think whoever's behind Amazon could end up becoming very, very rich.
Yeah, I think that's a theory.
There's a possibility of that.
Mark my words.
Yeah, it could happen.
Mark my words.
It could happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a real danger of just becoming a slave to Amazon because you spend all of the money you earn with Amazon back on Amazon. And
it's like one of these multi-level marketing things, isn't it? Yeah, where you have to buy their products to sell their products, but you need to buy
it's some kind of weird Ponzi scheme, isn't it, basically?
They made far more money off my books than I have.
Yeah, well, they deserve it, don't they, really? They put all in the hard hours.
It seems to me, James, that you quite like the business side of things. You seem to quite like the data and the numbers.
Absolutely love it.
Yeah.
I mean, business is my background.
Because I think that's probably quite rare for writing. I don't know if that's unfair or... I think that most writers like writing, and I think
it's probably more common for successful writers.
That's what I was going to say.
Well, yes.
I haven't met
That's probably true.
Personally in person at these conferences a successful self-published author yet who doesn't take the business side seriously.
Yeah.
The way I always try and tell it to people now, when anyone is stupid enough to ask my opinion, is as a self-published author, you have to split yourself into two people, one of which is the artist and one of which is the publisher. And publishing is a business, whether you like it or not. And that means you have to invest in it. It means you have to learn what you're doing. It means you have to take it very seriously and be analytical and work out your profit and loss and all these kind of this data. You have to get into it as much as you can. Because if you don't, you're just at a disadvantage. And some people will succeed despite being bad at the business side because their writing is just so good or their fan base is just so amazing or they get the viral hit or whatever. But I think that if you go into self-publishing and just poo-poo the business side and be like, I hate all that. I'm an artiste. I'm not going to do that. You're setting yourself up for failure. And I see it on Twitter all the time. If you follow the sort of hashtags and stuff related to the writing community and self-publishing that I do, just depressingly often I see people saying, I published my first book. It's not going well. I don't know how advertising works. Can someone tell me how an advert works? Or you get other people saying, I'm not going to bother with advertising, or, I'm not going to do this, but I only sell one book a month. I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but I know why you only sell one book a month. And that's because you're a self-publisher who doesn't do publishing. publishing is this massive, complicated business.
Yeah.
And if you don't get an agent and find yourself a publisher, you have to replace the function of that publisher if you want to succeed. And so you've got to understand about cover art, and you've got to make sure your cover art is appropriate for your genre. You've got to understand about editing and all the different types of editing so you don't get fleeced by all these kind of predatory services. You've got to understand the importance of things like proofreading. You've got to understand formatting. You've got to understand having comps, and you've got to understand how you're going to position your book in Amazon, in the marketplace, and your categorization. You've got to understand advertising on your chosen platform or a couple of platforms. You've got to understand so many things before you can think about putting your book out there and hoping it will succeed. And the most common mistake by an absolute mile that I see in self-published authors is they ignore the publishing side and they just publish because they didn't get an agent.
Yeah.
But they're hoping somehow magically people will find out about their book.
And occasionally that happens.
The trouble is because someone once did.
Yes.
So therefore that becomes a possibility, doesn't it?
And that's where the survivor bias comes in. They'll read a blog by someone who just bumbled their way into success by being a great writer.
Accidentally wrote a book and then I accidentally uploaded it to Amazon. Before you know it, Netflix deal.
I know someone who wrote some sci-fi books that weren't successful at all, just kind of for fun. And then they wrote a fantasy book for fun and they put it on Amazon and went to work and didn't really look at it and came back in the evening and it was a runaway success that evening. And they didn't really understand why or put any effort into it. And suddenly they had to learn how to be a professional publisher. And now he's very successful. But and that's the problem is
you see, now that story's got me thinking, I'm going to do it that way then, yeah.
Cool. But that's the survivor bias of these
accounts. It's an option.
Yeah, it's an option.
No, that sounds the best way,
It does sound great. It does sound great.
Yeah. I wanted to ask a question on a slightly different tack. What is it about Vikings that attracts you? Because I was half a fan of the Vikings series that was on Amazon, but it seems to be something that really drew you in. So where did that come from?
Oh, that's a really interesting question because I don't know. I don't think I'm specifically a Viking author. That's ridiculous. All my books so far are about Vikings. Yeah, but that's not actually what I set out to write as a whole career. But it's sort of what I've buttonholed myself as now. The inspiration for the series was an article about a guy and his daughter who were out at a lake in Sweden, and she waded into the water and basically tripped over a sword, pulled this Viking sword out of the water, and it made the news.
And became the ruler of
it became the head of their system of government. And then her name was Saga, which is rather poetic. And so I read that story on the BBC in about 2018, 2019. And I thought, man, that's really cool. I wish I knew what the story behind that sword was. And honestly, in that moment, I was like, well, I'm just going to write it. So then I wrote the story of that sword. I actually have that sword. It's a shame it's a podcast, not a YouTube video, because I'm now holding that sword. I had it made.
What?
Tom, cool. Tom, can you add the sound of a sword being drawn and held aloft at this moment?
I'm now holding that sword. Anyway, so I had the sword made. I wrote the book about the sword. And then suddenly I was a Viking author. So most of my book ideas and my sort of back burner projects are not actually about Vikings.
Will you just have to transpose them all into the Viking world?
I did try and pencil out an idea for a Space Vikings sci-fi thing, just for fun, but I don't think that will work out.
That sounds good.
That sounds like it should be one of those cheaply made 1980s children's cartoons, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like Mysterious Cities of Gold and what have you. Yeah. Space Vikings was the next stop on that journey.
Yeah.
Badly animated.
Yeah.
Anyway, however I ended up in Viking fiction, I'm glad I did, because there's a really fun community of Viking authors. And we actually had a Christmas dinner this year. We all got together and had beer and schnitzel in London.
Sounds like it would be a rowdy affair.
It was relatively rowdy.
I'm imagining you all in your furs and your big helmets.
No one dressed up. And I was disappointed that no one dressed up, because I was hoping someone would.
That is a shame.
Was it on a big table?
Yeah, it was in a sort of fake German style beer hall. So it was really long tables and benches.
Excellent.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so that's fun. So I am now a Viking author, sort of pigeonholed as that. But actually, after these two series are finished, I'm going to write about something else, because there's a limit to how many times you can describe a Viking fighting a Saxon or fighting another person. And I have been through every variation of sword and axe fight that you can possibly imagine. And I am so sick of writing about sword fights for Vikings. Yeah, honestly, how do you keep doing it? I don't know. I've written 6-7 books on it now. And yeah, I'm not going to write that many more.
To be fair, no one's going to remember. You just go back to the beginning and just use the same fights.
Yeah, I could just recycle them, couldn't I?
No one's going to remember.
Will it still be sort of historical fiction, or are you going to move into something completely different?
So I write in 3 genres, which is basically illegal. You just can't get away with it. But my first series was historical fantasy. It's not strictly historical fiction, and it's not really fantasy enough for fantasy fans to consider it fantasy. So it got stranded in no man's land between the two. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split into 2 authors, one of whom writes historical fiction and the other whom writes actual fantasy, because I read more fantasy and sci-fi than I read historical fiction anyway. It's my sort of preferred, more interesting genre, and you can do more with it. Historical fiction, it reminds me, I don't know if you've ever seen the film The Invention of Lying.
Yeah.
So if anyone who's seen it, you remember that the big part of the plot is the problem with doing historical television in this world where no one can lie is that the stories are always the same and you can't do anything interesting with them. And I feel that to some extent with historical fiction writing is that there's barely a story that hasn't been told, and it's you don't have enough creative freedom with it. So I partly want to write fantasy because you just write whatever you want. Write any old nonsense you like and then explain it. And it's fantastic, you know. Can that dragon fly upside down? Yes, it can. How? Magic.
That particular kind of dragon can, actually.
Yeah. You don't have to explain the shape of its wings. You don't have to give a historical precedent. You just say, there is magic. It's wonderful.
Yeah. That is nice. Oh, the freedom.
Yeah.
What do you reckon has been your biggest takeaway from the whole experience, the 1 year to pro experience, James?
If you think you're about to make it, don't tell everyone on the internet. Yeah,
that is actually great advice.
Yeah, don't shout about it until you're more certain.
Yes.
Yeah.
Might you try again?
I might, yeah, and I'll probably write about it as well because I don't learn from my mistakes.
I do not learn from my mistakes.
I think it's heartening. I think it's nice.
Yeah,
it's nice to hear, that people are. Well, the people are doing well in the first place, but maybe just need a bit more time, or we need a balance.
Well, I think what might be easier is to wait until you are super, super successful and then do a sort of 1 year to failure journey.
How quickly can I destroy my career?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, it's like doing, when people show the before and after of their diet success things, it'd be much easier if you were skinny. And then just 12 months later, you ballooned up. Yeah, that would be an easy way to do it.
I've never seen anyone do that. Yeah.
I put on 3 stone in a week. I mean, that's a story that I could read.
Yeah. I've got one last question to ask you. You said at the start, so your hobbies were writing and making swords?
So I don't make swords, but I make knives. Kitchen utensils.
Oh, right, okay.
They're very beautiful.
So, I mean, my kitchen is full of my own knives and I give them away to family and whatever, and I once sold one. Another thing that I thought I was going to be a great success at and wasn't.
But you couldn't quite cut it.
Oh, man, selling knives is really difficult, selling custom knives.
But you couldn't quite cut it.
Oh, sorry.
That's what I'm saying.
I missed that. I'm sorry for letting you down.
Fine.
No.
I thought you might be in a position to answer the question whether the pen was mightier than the sword.
Well, on my website, it says the guy who made that quote in the 1800s, the pen is mightier than the sword. I say just have both. Checkmate.
Yeah.
And I do. So
there.
Why choose?
Well, James, it has been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I just like talking to other people in the industry, really, because you don't get that many opportunities to do it.
Yeah, we're all cooped up, aren't we?
Yeah.
Really thanks for talking to us. It's been very insightful.
Thank you very much for having me on. Thanks, guys.
Cheers, James.
Thanks, James.
Cheers, James.
Bye,
Take care.
Dave, John, Tom.
Bye.
Cheers.
Cheers. Do you know, one of the things that struck me about that, boys, was you can plan everything, you can have stuff in place, you can do the work, get the books out. But like you were saying about people not following on from one of his series to the other, sometimes you just can't. It's kind of luck, isn't it? It's kind of you just need
you can't plan for that, really, can
a
you?
chance thing or a certain review, or so you can plan all you like. A lot of it's always down to luck.
Yeah. You just never know how a series is going to go. I saw something the other day on social media. It was a letter written by some Star Wars fan club members.
No?
Did you see this? Where it was from 1980 something or other.
No.
Where they were complaining about The Empire Strikes Back, saying how awful it was and how it veered away from the sort of the where Star Wars was, and they wouldn't be watching any further Star Wars. That it was the end of the franchise. And well, how wrong can you be?
I always find that quite interesting when fans get so crazed about telling the person who's invented it, come up with it, thought about it, written it, whose entire concept it is, and could literally do anything he wanted with it, and just go, actually, third one, everyone just gets blown up in 10 minutes. If he wanted to do that, he could do. But just how vehement they are about, you can't, that's wrong. Yeah. It can't be that.
It's just wrong.
But hey, look, that wasn't there. There was some actual informative and useful content in there, wasn't there, for a change?
Yeah. There was. And I think, as we said to him, just being totally clear on stuff, being transparent, and just putting down I better pretend I'm successful, otherwise you're not going to be successful. Don't let people know the real numbers. Yeah. You learn an awful lot from that, don't you? You really, really does open it up.
Yeah, it was lovely to hear that. But I do think we need to be quite careful that we don't do too much of this kind of thing, guys.
What's that?
Well, useful, informative content.
Do you think it's damaging to our brand?
I just think, I think there are other podcasts for that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
That's not really our remit, is it?
No one's here for that, are they? So,
I think you said on WhatsApp the other day, Tom, that was a proper writers podcast, wasn't it?
And bizarrely, that was exactly the tone of voice. It was difficult to read the tone of voice in comments, emails, and WhatsApps, isn't it? But that was it.
I got it.
It's like, wow, did we? Was that was us, wasn't it? Yeah, with the facts and the actual content. Yeah, well, fair enough.
Implied question mark at the end of it. Yeah.
So make the most of it, everyone, because it won't be happening again.
But it's very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Imagine being a full-time writer.
Might be rubbish.
Do you think you would enjoy the pressure of being a full-time writer, Tom? Honestly, like you're saying, it would be rubbish. Obviously, you're joking, but is there a little bit of you'd be like, would that take the fun out of it?
I think it would have been. I think you'd just be like any other job, really, where you just go from moments of stress to moments of relief in just kind of a large cycle.
How quickly?
Just be a long cycle, wouldn't it, of that as you finish the book and then it's done and then and I've got to start another one. I've got to get into it, and
how quickly would it become a job? That's the thing, isn't it?
I think that's the other side of things with it being a job, though. You get all the support, and I think it does change. It's going to change your psychology, isn't it? It's going to change your approach to it for a much more positive way. It's not about feeling a bit guilty because you've not done your little bit of fun time creative output.
Yeah, you're right. And you get actual feedback, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and you've got a structure around you. So it's probably a very different thing, isn't it? It's like saying you can keep playing five-a-side down the park or you can become a professional footballer. They're similar, but they are, at the same time, very different.
Yeah. Yes. One's paid a lot more than the other one, aren't they? So,
paid more than writing as well.
Yes.
What about you, Dave? Does the idea of doing that full-time appeal to you?
Well, the thing is, the other thing that it does is it takes away all of the excuses for not writing anything, doesn't it? Like all of
too busy with my job. Hold on a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Hang on.
Shit, this is my job. This is what I'm like. All of those I'd like to do some writing, but I should be doing something else. Things. No. You should be writing now. So you kind of got to, haven't you?
Yeah.
So I suppose it's quite. It strips everything bare, doesn't it? You've got nothing to hide behind. No,
you would find out a lot about yourself, I think.
Yeah.
If you just you just committed one day.
Yeah.
Maybe we should all do that then.
Well,
we should take a leaf out of Mr. Duncan's book there, quit our jobs for a year and just, change the podcast and it will just be updating people on our success or otherwise. That could happen too. Might not be a success of becoming full-time writers, fiction writers.
So our podcast would effectively become a begging forecast.
Well, ironically, I think our podcast would actually become the Failing Writers podcast, wouldn't it?
Yes.
So it doesn't really. Yeah.
What we need really is like enough collateral so that we can borrow enough money to like replace our income. So 3 lots of income for a year. Borrow that amount of money, and then you've got the impetus. You've got to succeed in some way over that year. Because at the end of it,
because your house may be at risk.
Exactly.
Repayments.
Yeah. You're going to be.
That's
screwed.
A real all or nothing.
But I prefer it that way, isn't it? It's like go for it, go big.
Well, you say that actually. That's a very good point about being a full-time writer. If your job is being a writer, then your home is at risk. If we talk about getting stuff done. That's the same thing, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, you're right.
It's go big or go home, but you might not have a home to go home to at the end of it.
Yeah, go to someone else's home. Yeah.
Right. Well, I'm not sure what the overlying end message of this episode is then really now, whether it is go on, give your dreams a real shot, but don't really. But steady on now.
I think take it seriously as a business.
Well, yes,
is a good idea.
Even if it's a side hustle and a secondary business too.
Don't just think, oh, people will come and read my books because they're great.
Yeah.
Because even if they are, people probably won't.
Yeah.
So you do actually need to. You need to chuck some money at it. You need to chuck a lot of time at it.
Yeah. What was it he said about the people who just happen to write something that's amazing and it's super successful? Unicorns? Was that what he said? That was his description, I think.
Yeah.
So,
if you are considering going full time and you're right on the cusp, let us know. Send us a message, failingwriterspodcast@gmail.com. We would love to hear what your little journey is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Well, it's been lovely hanging out with you people. Keep on writing. Are we going to keep writing? Are we writing this week, fellas? Are we
Yeah,
on it?
that would be nice, wouldn't it?
We probably should do, shouldn't we?
Probably
Not full
should.
time, but some time. Yeah. Part time. What have we got coming up next week then?
Well, David, I think we have decided to take a little mid-season break, and then we'll come back with some superb content in like a month's time, something like that.
Yeah.
So don't leave us completely. Don't just go away and forget about us. We will be back, but we're just going to have a little break. So go and write something. Go and do something useful.
It's a great opportunity for people just not to listen to us, isn't it? And go and actually write something.
Exactly.
Yes.
Go and do something.
Definitely.
Come back
writing.
with a fully finished book or something at the end of it.
And we will come back with some big ideas and fun podcasts. And some completely average content as well, mixed in and amongst.
Yes,
I'm going to lay out completely honestly.
For balance.
Yeah. We don't want to come back in, set the bar.
It's going to be our usual mix. Yeah.
If everything's brilliant, where do you go from there? Hey?
Yeah.
Absolutely, Dave.
Peaks and troughs.
And speaking about peaks and troughs, John's done a song about Vikings, which relates back to the interview topic a bit. So, yeah. Dear listener, you can decide whether this is in fact a peak or a trough.
I am a Viking, a king of the Vise. I'm probably going to kill you, take you by surprise. The chance I raid your village, I'd say, is pretty high. A bit of rape and pillage is always really nice. If we see something, we kill it, that is what we like. Turn your brains to nice, refill it, put it in a pie. I am a Viking, I'm blonde and buff and wise. I'm pleasant to my family, but everyone else must die. Everybody.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Whenever that might be.
See you on the other side.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
Hello.
Where's everybody gone?